All right, guys, so I had a comment that was begging me to do this video. What are the best phones with Stylus support? So there's not a ton of phones out there, but I have used quite a few of them. And let's go ahead and get into it. I want to talk about the Moto G Stylus 2024 edition. This phone is absolutely awesome. It is extremely underrated this year. Motorola did a fantastic job with this phone here. So you do have on here, it is a plastic bag, but it has a nice texture to it, and it's a plastic frame. But the phone does not feel cheap at all. It doesn't look cheap, which is something that I really like. So it is a more of a budget phone, so it is a water repellent design, so there's no official IP68 dust and water resistant rating on here, but the phone does make up for that with a headphone jack and having micro SD card support. And of course, the pen is built into the phone, which is really nice. And Motorola has a bunch of features that you could take advantage of, which is something that I like. I really like the calculator application that they were doing, where you could write stuff in the calculator and it would do the math for you. It looks like the iPhone actually kind of took that from Motorola, in my opinion. I saw it first from them. But yeah, so I want to talk about the display because everything else about this phone is pretty great. It's got a POLED display. It's 120 hertz, 1200 nits peak brightness at 6.7 inches. It's 1080p, 395 for the PPI. It's a beautiful display, respectable bezels, great colors. Like I said, very nice, smooth display on here, and it's pretty big display as well too, so I think most people will really like this panel here. Now this phone has Android 14. It will get one major OS update, and then it'll get security patches for a couple years. That's the only kind of downside about this phone, but it does have the Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor on here, and this is a very fast phone. I had zero issues with the software, zero issues with speed and opening a ton of applications, animations. Playing games on here was perfectly fine. I was able to play PUBG at pretty decent settings as well too. So like I said, you get the headphone jack and the micro SD card support, and it's actually a pretty fast phone, 128 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM on the base model here. So we do also have a fingerprint scanner. It's optical. It works fine. No real issues with that. Now the camera you would think would be bad, but the camera is actually pretty good. It's a 50 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 4K 30 video, and then a 32 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080 60. Overall, I was pretty impressed with the standard lens on here. I thought you get a good amount of detail, good dynamic range, decent video, nothing too crazy, but overall, I was impressed with the camera. I didn't think it was a bad camera at all. You also have a very good battery life, a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It has 30-watt charging, and they even threw in wireless charging on this phone, which is kind of rare for a budget device. So overall, this phone is excellent for the price, and it's about, you can find it for around 250, 300, depending on if it's locked or unlocked. All right, so next is the Note 20 Ultra. So this is a fantastic phone, and it actually is still going for around that $300 price point, even in the used refurbished marketplace. That's how much people love this phone, even though it is a older phone for sure. So this phone has the built-in S Pen. You have a 9 ms latency on here, so it is Bluetooth integrated and all that stuff. So you can take advantage of doing digital artwork on the Note because the pen is just really accurate. You have a still premium design on here, stainless steel, IP68 dust and water resistant. Overall, still a very nice, classy looking design here. It is a more boxier phone though. It has a massive 6.9-inch display. It's dynamic AMOLED, 120 hertz HDR10 plus, and it is a 1440p display at 496 for the PPI. And yeah, it is definitely a big phone. There's rumors that the S25 Ultra is going to go back to the 6.9-inch form factor here, so that'll be pretty exciting. And then you also do have on here Android 13 One UI 5. So this phone got its last major OS update with Android 13. It is currently getting security patches as well too. You also do have 128 gigs of internal storage and 12 gigs of RAM. Now this phone, it does have the Snapdragon 865 chipset on here. This phone is still extremely efficient. I might drop another gaming test for this phone. It can still play PUBG, Call of Duty. It can play a lot of games really well. It's just an overall very smooth phone. So I've been really impressed with the Note throughout the years here. So the speakers on here sound pretty decent. Nothing too crazy. They overall a decent sound. The fingerprint scanner is still very fast. You have the ultrasonic, and then you also do have on the Note A pretty decent camera setup. It does suffer in low light, but in good lighting, you can still actually get a very good shot out of the Note. It's got a 108 megapixel standard with a 12 megapixel periscope telephoto that does 5 times optical zoom with a 12 megapixel ultra wide. You can shoot an 8K24 with a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. Overall, if you guys see, the shots here, I think this is still pretty decent for, 2024. Like I said, the low light, not as good. Also, battery life is not really anything too special on this phone. It's okay. It's a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, 25-watt charging, and wireless and reverse wireless charging. Definitely a phone that you should consider if you really want S Pen. All right, some of you guys probably saw this one coming if you watched the channel. The LG V60, highly recommend. You can find this phone very, very cheap. And this phone not only has pen support, but it does have dual screen case support. It also does have a quad DAC, headphone jack, and then you also do have on here SD card support. It's got everything that you could really want if you are a power user. This is a phone that I got my dad as well too this year, and he's been really liking it. So guys, I highly recommend this phone, especially if you want that, pen support. You can use it with the V60. It's got the aluminum frame on here. It's IP68 dust and water resistant, and it's just an overall solid build. I really like the build quality on here throughout the years. I haven't had any issues with it. Now, this phone, it does have a 6.8-inch POLED display. It's HDR10+. It's 1080p 395 for the PPI. Overall, a beautiful panel. It still looks really good color-wise. I think the only thing that might be a little bit dated about this panel is that there's no high refresh rate. But the 60 hertz is pretty smooth on here. But like I said, you get that dual screen case support, so you can turn it into 2 phones. This phone, again, got Android 13. It's the Snapdragon 865 chipset on here. Again, micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM. This phone is also a beast when it comes to performance. You can definitely still play PUBG really well, Call of Duty. The phone is extremely smooth still, so 0 issues with performance on here. Absolutely great. You also have very good sounding stereo speakers, and again, that headphone jack. This phone, even if you just buy just to listen to music, it is an awesome experience if you have a good pair of headphones to use that quad DAC. The fingerprint scanner is okay. It's an optical one. It does work. There is no face unlock though. You also do have a still pretty decent camera setup. It's a 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide. You have a 0.3 depth sensor, 8K 30 video, and a 10 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. Awesome quality in the daytime, but again, with these older flagships, the thing that you'll start to notice is that low light photography is not that great, but this phone can still give you a really good shot in good lighting. So definitely still a very decent camera for taking pictures here. So overall, the battery life is actually pretty good on the V60. My V60, I have not replaced the battery. Excellent standby time, just really good. You also have the wireless charging as well. Can easily get through the day with this phone. All right, guys, so your next option would be the S21 Ultra, which is actually pretty cheap phone these days. I just did a video about it not too long ago, and you can find this for around $250 to $300, and it's an absolutely fantastic phone. Now, the S Pen is not built in with this phone. You have to buy the S Pen case with it, but you still get all the same features as you would on a any Galaxy phone, right? So just do note that. But besides that, the phone is absolutely fantastic. The interesting thing about the S21 Ultra is that it's way more comfortable than a Note 20 Ultra or something like that, because it's not as boxy. So this phone, even though it's a bigger phone, this phone is way more comfortable. So if you have smaller hands, you probably will like this phone a lot more. It's got that premium design, the nice cutout for the camera. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. Overall, still a very nice looking phone. We also do have a 6.8-inch display, dynamic AMOLED, 120 Hz HDR10+, 1500 nits peak brightness. It is full 1440p at 515 for the PPI, and you can use this phone at 120 Hz at its full resolution, unlike the Note 20 Ultra as well too. So I just want to mention that. What's cool about this phone is that you will get the Android 15 update. It is on the Android 14 One UI 6.1 update, and it's running the Snapdragon AAA processor. Again, this is not my favorite chipset. I do think it gets a little bit warm when you're gaming and stuff like that. For just general use, it is perfectly fine. So I've never had this phone crash on me or do anything crazy. But yeah, if you're a gamer or something like that, then you would definitely notice that this phone gets a lot warmer. And then it is 128 gigs and 12 gigs of RAM on the base model here. You also do have pretty decent stereo speakers, great fingerprint scanner as well too. And then you also do get on here, I think, a really good camera setup at this price point. It's a 108 megapixel standard, a 10 megapixel telephoto with 3 times optical, a 10 megapixel periscope telephoto with 10 times optical, and then you also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide. You can shoot an 8K 24 with a 40 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. What's really impressive about this phone is it still takes very good zoom shots. So once you do like 10 times, 30 times, you will be really impressed. I did like a day in a life in this phone in Vegas. And I was just really impressed with how nice and crisp the zoom shots were. So definitely, if you're looking for a phone with a really great camera, excellent zoom photography, then you would really like this phone at this price point. The battery life is just kind of okay on this phone. It's not anything too crazy. As a lighter user, I'm able to get through the day with this phone. It's got 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 25 watts, wireless and reverse wireless charging. If you are gaming, doing more intensive stuff, then you definitely gonna have to charge this phone for sure. All right, guys, next is the Galaxy S22 Ultra here. This is a fantastic phone, and what I like about this phone is that it's new enough where it feels really fresh. You will still be getting software updates and stuff like that. So it is going to be a little bit more expensive at around $400 to around $350. But I think it is still a great deal for anybody who wants to experience that S Pen. And the latency got down to around 2.8 ms on here as well too. So that is really nice. So it's very, very accurate. You also do have on here still pretty much the same design as the Note, just with a different camera setup. It's a very boxy phone. It has that matte finish on here. It overall looks more modern compared to the older phones. It looks more like an S24, S23, which is really nice. Overall, I do like the design. It still has a very nice display at 6.8 inches. It is a 1440p display, dynamic AMOLED, 120 Hz HDR10 plus. This one does very good in outdoors direct sunlight at 1750 nits peak brightness, 540 ppi, very sharp 1440p panel on here. So overall, nothing to complain about besides the curved panel. So it does have a curved panel, so that is something to note just in case you don't like curved panels. And this phone, it will get 4 major OS updates. We are on One UI 6.1. And this phone runs absolutely, phenomenal. I think the One UI 6.1 actually helped this phone a lot with standby time as well too. It's got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 on here. And again, this is one of those phones that can get warm when you're doing very intense gaming. For general performance, I really don't have an issue with this chipset at all. It's 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on the base model. And still gaming on here, playing PUBG, you can play at high FPS on here. And overall, the gaming experience, if you're a casual gamer, is perfectly fine. So this phone, it does have some of the weakest speakers, I think, in an S series phones. It just does not sound all that great. There's not a lot of bass with the speakers, so that's only probably the one thing I don't like about this phone. Fingerprint scanner is absolutely fine on here. The cameras are still very good on here. It's 108 megapixel standard, 10 megapixel telephoto, 3 times optical, 10 megapixel periscope telephoto, 10 times optical, 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot an 8K 24. 40 megapixel selfie that can shoot in 4K 60. Still will give you very, very good shots. Always impressed with the S22 Ultra, especially if you're in good lighting. Video is solid as well too. Great zoom photography. Also, you do have, again, it's okay battery life on this phone. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 45 watt charging. It does have wireless and reverse wireless charging. Overall, it's a very good pick. If you're planning on, you want to keep your phone for a pretty long time. I think this is a very good investment. Now, next is going to be the S23 Ultra. This is the phone that I would get if, I had, $700. If you have a bigger budget to work with, I would get this actually over the S24 Ultra because they're just so similar. And you're going to be saving quite a bit of money, right? You also do have on here pretty much, the same design. It's aluminum frame, IP68, dust and water resistant. The S Pen is very good on here. It's very accurate as well too. beautiful panel on here. It's a dynamic AMOLED 120 Hz HDR10 Plus. Again, 1750 nits peak brightness, 1440p, 500 for the PPI. This one has a curve, but it's a less dramatic curve. So overall, I really love the display on here. And this phone, it will get the 4 major OS updates. It is on One UI 6.1. And this phone has a absolutely fantastic processor. It's got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is very efficient. It really doesn't heat up too much. It's 256 gigs of internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM on the base model. You can take advantage of the Galaxy AI features as well too, and also you can take advantage of the AI features on the S22 Ultra as well. And overall, the performance on here is just much better. It just does a much better job when you're doing gaming and stuff like that. Also, the speakers are much better on here. Very loud, very nice speakers on here. The cameras are pretty much on par with the S24 Ultra in my opinion. It's really not too far off. It's a 200 megapixel standard, 10 megapixel telephoto, 3 times optical, 10 megapixel periscope telephoto, 10 times optical, 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot in 8K 30 with a 12 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K 60. Overall, a fantastic camera. Like I said, if you want current flagship quality cameras, you could really just buy this one. You don't have to buy the S24. You'll get pretty much the same photos. So the fingerprint scanner is awesome. No issues there with this phone. You also do have very good battery life. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 45 watt charging, wireless and reverse wireless charging. Because of the chipset, the battery is way more efficient on this phone. So overall, I would highly recommend this phone. Also, honorable mention, the S24 Ultra. If you do want to go all out, on a phone here, the main benefits to the S24 over the S23 would be it's got a completely flat display. It does way less because of the titanium design as well too. And the biggest thing is it'll get 7 years of major OS updates. And like I said, the cameras aren't too much different. The processor is very good on here, but it's not that much better than the 8 Gen 2. And then overall battery life is pretty good on here, like I said, but those are probably like the 3 main things with this phone. So if you want to spend, you just got the money to spend, you can find this phone, use refurbished marketplace, $800, $900. So be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next